السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. I want to share a story from Maulana Rumi. He shares that there was a man that went to the barber, and in those days you didn't just go to the barber to get a haircut. You could also go to the barber to get a tattoo. And so he went to the barber and he said, well, I have this urge to be like a lion. And so would you give me a tattoo that looks like a lion? He said, sure, hop in the chair. So he started to go and to make his way and to do the needlework that was required for the tattoo. And before everybody starts giving fatwas, it's a story, right? So we know that we don't have tattoos in Islam, right? And so he starts working on the lion. And as soon as he starts putting in the needle and the man starts to shout, he said, ow, that really hurts. What are you doing? And he said, well, I'm starting on the tail. And the man, he thought about it for a second. He said, well, I don't really need a tail. Can you just skip that part? So the barber said, sure, okay, I'll give you a line without a tail. So he keeps working and he gets to the ear. And the man again shouts, ow, that really hurts. Can you stop? He says, okay, what is it that you are working on? I was working on the ear. He said, I don't really need that. Give me a line without an ear. So he continues and he starts getting to the mane, and the man shouts again, ow, that hurts. And then finally he got to carving the part of the stomach or the abdomen of the lion, and the man started to scream. And he said, this is way too painful. I don't need a lion with a stomach, with an abdomen. Now the barber at this point, he was kaput. He said, even God himself has not made a lion like that. You're asking me for the impossible. You want a lion, but you don't want any of the pain or the sacrifice that goes into making the lion. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi al-Balkhi, he says that the example of the man that wants the lion tattoo but doesn't want to go under the needle is like those that aspire for spiritual states, but they don't want to work on themselves. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi is saying that we are like that man. We want the lion tattoo so we can feel that we're having a spiritual experience, but we may not want to do the introspection. We may not want to examine some of our habits, some of our behaviors that require refining. The reason I started with this story is because this month of Ramadan, I'd like to start a series on Al-Akhlaq Al-Muhamaddiya, the Muhammadan character that we find within the Quran. And so for the first night that I'm presenting, I'd like to mention one of the ayat that Qari Anas recited in the second rak'ah. Not only is a very beautiful concept of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's majesty and who He is, but it's also a dua. We recited, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. Say, O Allah, you are the owner of all sovereignty. تُؤْتِ الْمُلْكَ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. You give from that sovereignty, all of which belongs to you, to whomever you will. وَتَنْزِعُ الْمُلْكَ مِمَّنْ تَشَاءُ. And you remove that sovereignty from whomever you will. وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. And you exalt whomever you wish. وَتُذِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ. And you debase whomever you wish. بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ. In your hand is all good. إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Surely you are capable over all things. I know this is a very joyous occasion for all of the believers around the world, reaching the month of Ramadan. But it's one which is bittersweet because this year there's always suffering every year, but this year we especially feel it as an ummah because of what's happening in Gaza and because of what's happening in Sudan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to alleviate this hardship and to protect the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What I want to address my comments are the questions that are coming from many of the believers that how would Allah allow this to happen? That doesn't victory belong to believers? وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. That how could it be that people, good people, could suffer that much? And this, my dear brothers and sisters, is a misunderstanding on our part. And it also shows a lack of adab with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a lack of etiquette to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in associating physical means, wealth and resources with outcomes. Don't we know, brothers and sisters, that although we live in a world in which Newtonian physics operates, that if I drop something it's gonna fall, that if there's a fire it's gonna burn, that if I'm holding a knife that it can cut, that these asbab, that these causes cannot affect these musabbabat. They cannot cause those effects except through an intermediary, which is Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Because He is musabbibul asbab. He is the one that makes the cause have the effect. And so we should not say, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, that if this country had this power, then this would not happen. And if I had this ability, then this would not happen. That there is an amount of wealth that we can accumulate that will prevent us from having poverty. That there's an amount of power that we can accumulate that will prevent human suffering. When we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most meticulous clockmaker. That there is nothing that happens early and there is nothing that ever comes a moment late. بِيَدِهِ الْخَيْرِ. And so now it begs a new question. That if you're saying, Brother Refai, that everything is happening the way it's supposed to happen, then when does the ease come? فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. As you know, two eases cannot be overcome by one hardship. إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. So for that one difficulty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends the ease that comes afterward, and He also sends the ease that accompanies that hardship. But the answer to that is found elsewhere in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that نَصْرٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَتْحٌ قَرِيبٌ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends down His divine intervention, that He sends down His help and assistance. وَفَتْحٌ قَرِيبٌ. And it is a very near, it is a very close opening that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Al-Fattah sends. So when we ask that question, when we wonder the question, why didn't it happen yet? Then we have to remind ourselves that it happens soon. Isn't it we're reciting from Surah Al-Imran. How long did Zakaria wait for that miraculous child? But didn't Yahya come? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after all that patience and difficulty and hardship, إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا. But because of a very humble dua, similar to the humility of Allahumma malik al-mulk, that, oh Allah, You are the only one that has power. Because he didn't put his confidence in the means, but he put confidence in the one that causes the means to make the effect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made an opening for Zakaria. Maryam, when she was in need and she was alone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent her fruit that were out of season. Sent her ma'idah, sent her food and a table spread from the heavens, and sent a miraculous child that was a peace from the moment that he was born, and that was a peace throughout his life, and will continue to be a source for all of the humanity until the day that he dies and returns back to his Creator, Allah Azza wa Jal. And so, my dear brothers and sisters, to go full circle, part of the adab and the etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is teaching us. He says, قُل, say Allahumma. قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ. So part of the lesson is Allah is not just telling us about His tawheed. He's not just telling us about who He is. He's telling us about how to think about Him. That when we invoke and when we ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's assistance, then understand that it's not the resources and the means that are going to give you assistance, but rather it is the raw power, a reservoir that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives, He gives from that which is limitless. And that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees something, لا مانع لما يعطي, then there is nothing that can stop what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to cause to happen. So with that in mind, we ask sincerely from the bottom of our hearts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant victory and speedy assistance to the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in all of the places in which the people and all of humanity, and especially the believers, are suffering. We ask you, Ya Allah, that you answer the dua of every oppressed person. And we ask you, Ya Allah, that you forgive those that have passed away, that you accept those that have returned back to you as shaheed, and that you heal and that you cure all of those that are afflicted, injured, and those who are sick. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.